In tonight's headlines, Chief Executive John Lee visits residents in Oimen Estate ahead of the Lunar New Year. A 29-year-old Hongkonger who has been released from a Myanmar scam farm will fly home on Monday before Lunar New Year. And 4 freed Israeli women hostages arrive home in Israel after Hamas handed them over to the Red Cross under the Gaza truce deal. Chief Executive John Lee spent his afternoon engaging with residents in Oimen Estate as part of his 4-day tour to connect with grassroots communities ahead of the Lunar New Year holidays. Lee interacted with local vendors within the housing estate in Ho Man Tin as a crowd of citizens gathered around to watch. Lee then took time to meet with 2 elderly residents living alone, understanding their living conditions and offering them goodies bags. After spending around 30 minutes there, Lee made a brief stop at a grain store as he sampled Lunar New Year delicacies. He purchased 2 boxes of turnip cakes, adding that good things come in pairs and planning to share them with his wife. The store owner, impressed by the chief executive's visit, expressed hopes for more Hong Kongers supporting local businesses instead of heading north. Elderly residents were also happy to chit-chat with the city chief, especially an 88-year-old lady who thought he was down to earth. She also hoped the government would continue supporting the elderly by keeping the $2 transfer scheme running. Speaking to the press, Lee stated that he had received positive feedback from local store owners regarding their sales performances. Earlier in the day, he also visited the community living room in Hong Kong and shared a meal with the residents there. Lee extended his wishes for a healthy and prosperous Year of the Snake to everyone as he wrapped up his visit. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
One more Hong Konger was rescued from Myanmar after being lured into forced illegal labor in Southeast Asia and is set to fly home from Thailand on Monday, right before Lunar New Year. Announcing the good news today, Secretary for Security Chris Tan said that members of his bureau's task force had met with the 29-year-old man the night before. When my colleague called me last night, I could feel how emotional they were. The task force finally met with the victim after such a long time. They almost embraced each other in tears, Tan said. The government task force has been in Thailand since Tuesday, investigating and assisting in the rescue of several Hong Kongers who were deceived and held against their will in Southeast Asian countries. With their help, the Hong Konger was released from a compound in Myanmar on January 19th, after the Thai government pressured authorities in the neighboring country, according to Tan. The security chief said the government would do its utmost to rescue the remaining 10 Hong Kong residents still detained in the region, but acknowledged that more time is required for the mission due to the complexities of trafficking operations often occurring outside Hong Kong and involving conflict zones. In a separate development, Tan refuted claims that the government would deny visas to mainland students, only for failing to complete anti-scam questionnaires, saying that these issues are not directly linked. He emphasized that the questionnaires aim to raise awareness about phone scams and urged the students to remain vigilant, as approximately 320 such cases were reported over the past year, involving nearly $230 million. Quentin Yap, Cable News.
Customs Chief Chen Zi-tet said the government's proposed duty-paid labeling system on all cigarette packages is a cost-effective measure in fighting against untaxed ones, as he also pledged to ramp up efforts to curb illicit cigarette smuggling. Speaking on iCable's news program Let's Talk, Chen said authorities has referenced approaches from 40 regions globally, with only Singapore requiring a label on each individual cigarette. In Hong Kong, since cigarettes can only be sold as complete packages, a label on the package will be enough for authorities to identify duty-paid products, he said. Chen added that while the tobacco industry will have to bear the cost of the upcoming labeling system, the high production volume could drive the price down to less than $1 per label. The government's proposal to amend 10 tobacco control measures is set for submission to the Legislative Council in the first quarter. The duty-paid labeling system will be among the first to be introduced under the phased rollout of the measures. Chan noted that the labels will encompass anti-forgery features, with a digital tag for officers to use scanners to detect duty-paid products across the market. Chan said the Customs and Excise Department will launch a pilot scheme on the labeling system in the middle of the year, working with a local cigarette manufacturer to test the logistics and technology before full implementation. Cheryl Yun, Cable News.
The Tobacco and Alcohol Control Office continued to crack down on illegal water pipe smoking activities in no-smoking areas. Co-named Pipe Surge, officers carry out inspections and enforcement action at a bar in Wan Chai district yesterday evening. During the operation, they issue a total of 5 fixed penalty notices to persons illegally smoking water pipes, also known as shisha. The investigation is still ongoing, and operators of the bar may also be prosecuted on charges of aiding and abetting smoking offenses. Under the legislation, any person doing a smoking act in statutory no-smoking areas is liable to a fixed penalty of $1,500. A spokesman for the Department of Health reminded the public that a typical 1-hour water pipe smoking section exposes the user to 100 to 200 times more smoke than what is inhaled from a single conventional cigarette. Last year, the office issued a total of 162 fixed penalty notices and sent 89 summonses to staff and operators of the bars or restaurants for other related offenses. Facing a projected fiscal deficit of nearly $100 billion, Secretary for Development Bernadette Lin emphasized that the government would not abandon the Haoyi Artificial Islands project, but rather reprioritized. The project was postponed last year, and the government considered kicking off reclamation work within the current term.
Taking
to the airwaves, Lin reinforced that the timeline of the project is extended, but not abandoned at all, with research and preparation work ongoing. Addressing the cost of Northern Metropolis, the development chief noted that they are exploring the possibility of government procurement of construction materials and reviewing building standards. While we must prioritize safety and quality, we also review whether the standards are too high. In some cases, advanced technology allows us to use thinner pillars, which can help reduce costs, Lin added. On last year's land sale revenue front, which only met 12% of the whole year's target, Lin acknowledged that the property market has not yet recovered, which was understandable. She also noted that the response to the residential site on Meitin Road in Tai Wai, which closed for bidding yesterday, was positive. The minister revealed that the 2024-25 budget will announce one more year of the funding for public works projects, believing all projects could be completed within the budget. Evelyn Bai, Cable News.
Kai Tak Sports Park has successfully passed its largest test event so far, efficiently managing 63,000 spectators across 3 venues within 45 minutes to disperse through various transport options last night, as reported by Secretary for Transport and Logistics Mabel Chen. In a radio interview this morning, Chen noted that additional MTR train services were implemented alongside 10 extra bus routes to accommodate 7,300 passengers, exceeding initial expectations. We hope these routes can be utilized for transporting attendees during future large-scale events, Chen said. Addressing the significant flight cancellations by Greater Bay Airlines, Chen emphasized the priority of arranging appropriate accommodations and compensation for all affected customers. The transport chief also provided an update on the legislation to regulate ride-hailing services, revealing that the Transport Advisory Committee has formed a working group and will engage with several platform operators next month for in-depth discussions.
It has been nearly a week since the ceasefire between Israel and Palestinian group Hamas took effect. After releasing 3 Israeli hostages last week, Hamas freed 4 more captives today in exchange for 200 Palestinian prisoners held in Israel. Karina Aliyev, Daniela Gilboa, Nama Levy, all 20 years old, along with 19-year-old Liri Albag, were handed over to Red Cross representatives at Palestine Square in Gaza City. All 4 were among 7 female soldiers kidnapped from an army base when Hamas launched a surprise attack on southern Israel on October 7, 2023. The current truce in the 15-month-long war will see the release of 33 Israeli hostages in exchange for roughly 1,800 Palestinians over 6 weeks. Hamas is expected to provide more information about the remaining 26 hostages due to be released in the coming weeks. Further negotiations to extend the ceasefire could possibly guarantee the release of more hostages and a withdrawal of Israeli forces from Gaza.
On this vote, the yeas are 50 and the nays are 50. The Senate being equally divided, the Vice President votes in the affirmative and the nomination is confirmed.
A single vote cast by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance confirmed the appointment of Pete Hegseth as the new Defense Secretary of the United States. Hegseth, a former Army veteran and television host for American network Fox News, is a longtime loyalist of U.S. President Donald Trump. A decorated veteran, 44-year-old Hegseth was awarded the Bronze Star while serving in the Special Operations Forces during a combat deployment to Iraq in 2005. In 2014, he voluntarily deployed to Afghanistan to train the Afghan security forces. Hegseth's nomination for Defense Secretary was overshadowed by allegations of misconduct. He has been accused of sexual assault and excessive drinking. Overlooking the U.S. Department of Defense, which has an annual budget of nearly $1 trillion, Hegseth will lead 1.3 million active duty service members and roughly 1 million civilians who work for the U.S. military.